Gen Z has it even worse than me, so much so that they're seeking out classes for how to be a functional adult, and they're turning to Canada.
So a lot of millennials and Gen Zs get on here and talk about how they feel like kids in adult bodies, like they don't really feel like real adults.
I hate being an adult! I hate being an adult! I hate it!
I'm 27 and working on healing my inner child was the best thing I've ever done. I'm nearly in my 30s and I collect dolls.
It's 2 a.m. at Doncaster Shopping Centre in Melbourne's East, and Lawrence Yu is one of hundreds of people lining up for a chance to buy a Labubu.
Labubu. Labubu. Labubu. Labubu. Labubu.
I don't have a dream job. I don't dream of labor.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah, I just gotta be honest, I don't know what the big deal is.
Get out.
Gen Z are lazy, entitled, show no respect, are impossible to manage, and really need to buckle up their ideas and get real.
I just realized it doesn't matter how early I go to sleep. I just don't want to go to work.
If you're an adult with a Labubu, it's a clear red flag that you have not dealt with your childhood trauma.
I probably spent close to 1.6k Australian dollars on Labubus.
Generation Z, you know, the ones who are quiet quitting, rejecting traditional work culture, and proudly not dreaming of labor. The ones living at home longer than any generation since the Great Depression, dating less, having less sex, showing less interest in marriage or kids. In other words, showing less interest in growing up altogether. Gen Z have perfected the art of nostalgia, romanticizing their lives not just from 5 or 10 years ago, but from literally last month.
I don't know what Gen Z person needs to hear this today, but 2016 was not that great.
They have 40,000 unread emails in their inboxes, they refuse to answer phone calls, and freeze at the smallest adult tasks. Or so they say. And of course, the whole plushies craze, the Labubu hysteria, if you will, grown adults throwing tantrums over limited edition toys, all under the excuse of healing your inner child. When you put it all together like that, you start to understand why Gen Z has been called childish, lazy, the Peter Pan generation. I mean, take your pick. And sure, every generation gets called immature or unprepared by the one before. Like, we all remember how millennials were accused of being fragile snowflakes obsessed with avocado toast. But with Gen Z, it's a bit different. Like, the way they cling to childhood seriously needs to be studied. Like, at times it honestly feels like Gen Z live like kids in adult bodies. Now, let me preface this by saying, even though I'm a zillennial myself, mentally I think I'm more Gen Z than I am a millennial. I recognize a lot of Gen Z's behaviors and quirks in myself, even the ones people absolutely drag online. Like the infamous Gen Z stare, yeah. I think I was born with that, to be honest. So I'm not coming at this from some sort of gotcha perspective or anything like that, but still, I am interested in this topic, and mostly because, yes, Gen Z clearly has a fascination with their childhood, but I don't think it is as simple as Gen Z just doesn't want to grow up. So as usual, I want to figure out the whys behind these behaviors. Why does this generation cling so tightly to childhood? Why are they so nostalgic all the time? And are they truly childish, or are they just reacting rationally to the world they were handed? Let's get into it. Okay, let's start with one of the biggest reasons Gen Z clings to childhood so desperately. It's because they never actually got to live a real one in the first place. In preparation for this video, I've actually read this book called The Anxious Generation: How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness. By the way, it's a great read. I would highly recommend it if you're wanting to read something about this topic. And in this book, the author, Jonathan Haidt, talks about how kids today essentially grew up under constant surveillance with phones in their hands and very little unsupervised play. Think about it. Childhood used to be like a training ground for adulthood. It was messy, risky, chaotic, and that was the whole point. The risks were kind of necessary to provide children with developmental milestones, even if those milestones were often disguised as play. I, for one, remember walking myself to school in 4th grade, coming home alone with my own key, grabbing a snack, quickly doing my homework, because yes, I was one of those annoying academic validation kids, and then running outside to play with my friends until dinner. And my mom would frequently send us to the store if she needed bread or sugar or anything else, and it was literally no big deal. I didn't have like 10 different extracurricular activities or color-coded schedule. Frankly, all I had to do was go to school, finish my studies for the day, and spend the rest of my time playing outside or however else I wanted. And I think I turned out okay. Looking back, I'm extremely grateful I got to experience that type of childhood, because I honestly think that's how you develop essential life skills, like walking yourself to school builds certain autonomy, playing outside without adults around teaches you conflict resolution, negotiation, and communication, and biking too far or breaking a certain rule might have earned you trouble, but it was also a lesson in failure and consequences, right? Brittany Hart-Sholton writes in her essay for Business Insider, "Our front yard has truly become a hub of childhood fun. Almost every day you will see at least 5 kids running around outside on our street. 2 boys and 3 girls, ages 4, 5, 7, 7, and 8. One of the most inspiring aspects of their playtime is how they resolve conflicts over what to do. With 5 unique personalities, disagreements naturally arise. One child may want to host a front yard fashion show, while another prefers a game of catch. These differences sometimes lead to arguments among children. However, these disagreements help them learn to take turns, make compromises, and give everyone an opportunity to enjoy their preferred activity."
There is a famous Jesuit expression that says, "Give me the child before 7 and I shall give you the adult." Because how we spend the first years of our life defines who we grow up to be, and how we teach and treat our children defines the societies in which we want to live. And according to Peter Gray in a recent Eon essay, we are depriving children of one of the most essential elements of development: free play. Free play is where a child leads the way. They choose where to go, who to play with, what to do, and what the rules are. And of course this is risky, because children are foolish and reckless. But that's the point. Free play is what builds confidence, resilience, and autonomy. It's what allows a child to grow up. Gray argues that childhood today is governed by 3 things: overscheduling, adult direction, and digital immersion. Every minute of a child's day is crammed with an activity, however well-meaning, and almost always under adult supervision. Mum takes you to swimming classes, dad drives you to karate, and there must be one adult for every 3 children at all times. The problem isn't theoretical, because when a child is deprived of free and risky play, they are more likely to develop anxiety disorders and less likely to develop emotional intelligence and social skills. For Gray, we need to develop more social spaces for kids to play and give them more free time to do so. But more than anything, we need to trust children, including small children, to work it out. After all, we did.
Yeah, all of those little things are critical experiences that teach kids how to move through the world confidently before they actually have to do it completely on their own. But sadly, in the last 2 decades, these kinds of things, so the off-screen playtime, the independence, have slowly disappeared. And what replaced them was a sanitized, supervised version of childhood that looked safe, but in reality left an entire generation emotionally untrained for the chaos of adult life. To quote Jonathan Haidt for The Atlantic, "The intrusion of smartphones and social media are not the only changes that have deformed childhood. There's an important backstory beginning as long ago as the 1980s, when we started systematically depriving children and adolescents of freedom, unsupervised play, responsibility, and opportunities for risk-taking, all of which promote competence, maturity, and mental health. But the change in childhood accelerated in the early 2010s, when an already independence-deprived generation was lured into a new virtual universe that seemed safe to parents, but in fact is more dangerous in many respects than the physical world." And it's true, like the rise of helicopter parenting and surveillance tech massively contributed to this shift, and starting in the early 2000s, there was this cultural obsession with safety and control. Obviously, 9/11 was a turning point, but it wasn't just that. The lingering stranger danger panic from the 90s, plus the explosion of 24/7 news and the internet, all of that meant that the stories about predators, kidnappers, and shootings were now everywhere, all the time. And I honestly think that a lot of us don't even recognize how abnormal that is, that we literally grew up with the least amount of privacy of anyone on earth. Also, Gen Z has been cuddled more, partly because families have gotten a lot smaller now, and parents also have children later in life, and fewer kids meant that each one was nurtured and monitored more carefully, and that naturally turned into harsher supervision than what previous generations had to deal with. And well, trust me, I understand the benefits tech surveillance can have for children's safety, like the fact that parents could step in quickly if something went wrong, that you could use cell phones to call for help if necessary, and that predators had a harder time accessing kids in general. Like, those are all positive sides, no one is denying, but still that safety came at a cost.
Did our parents really just let us run around the neighborhood all day? No phone, no water, barely a goodbye, just be home before dark? And somehow we survived?
Gen X could go out and their parents had no idea where they were until they came home. Millennials might have had a Nokia brick phone. I know I had one, and yeah, if your mom called, you kinda had to pick up. But also, there was never this constant overlooming presence of your parents hanging over you. Like, you didn't have to worry about your location being tracked through Find My iPhone or anything like that. And growing up like that creates a mindset where you're never really alone and never truly trusted to figure things out. Like, even if your parents respected your privacy and didn't actively snoop, you always knew that they could. And harboring parents didn't just take away privacy, they also filled every single moment of their kids' lives with structured activities and stepped in to solve problems before their children even had the chance to face them themselves. Once again, I get that the intention was protection, which is good, but we have to admit that by removing risks, they also removed the learning opportunities that came with them. So, to kind of recap this section, in previous generations, childhood was free, dangerous, and experimental, while adulthood was stable, structured, and full of predictable milestones. You get a job, you buy a house, and you settle down. Today, though, childhood is overly safe and structured, while adulthood is unstable, unpredictable, and frankly, terrifying. More on that later. As a result, you now have 22-year-olds entering the workforce who freeze when making decisions because they never truly practice autonomy, who struggle with in-person conflict because they never had low-stake fights with their friends, and who avoid risks altogether because failure truly feels catastrophic when you've never ever failed before. Yeah, when young adults are thrown into the chaos without ever being taught how to navigate it, it's no wonder that so many Gen Zers cling to childhood comforts and come across as childlike or unprepared for basic adult responsibilities. And honestly, you can even see that dynamic play out online. Like, I'm about to go off on a bit of a tangent here, but bear with me, because I feel like there's another layer to this conversation that might be strictly an online issue, but still, I want to talk about it. Because I must say, even though you'll notice throughout this video, I'm quite empathetic to Gen Z clinging to childhood and all that, but the way some of you guys behave on the internet, like truly helpless children, just boils my blood sometimes. You've probably seen it too, the whole whataboutism, right? Like, what about me? What if I'm allergic to this and that? Like, the other day I saw a girl making cinnamon buns on TikTok and someone actually commented, "Can I make them without cinnamon?" And the girl literally answered, "No, they're gonna explode all over your kitchen." Like, guys, I fear we have lost the plot, and also they aren't really cinnamon buns if you don't put cinnamon in them, are they?
I can never be a food content creator because if I'm giving out a recipe and the main ingredient of the recipe is apples and someone leaves me a comment saying, "What if I don't like apples?" I'm going to reply back to the comment, "Well, fuck you then."
Whataboutism is like whenever you watch a TikTok, here's my example. You're watching a TikTok of somebody being like, "Here's how I make my homemade bread," and somebody comments, "But I'm gluten-free." What about people who are gluten-free? Like, I'm gluten-free. Don't make the fucking bread. Like, don't watch a video of somebody making bread. Do not make the bread. Do not eat the bread. Scroll by. Like, why go out of your way to comment it? You know what I mean? The girl who made the video was saying that was saying that one of her pet peeves is slow walkers, and somebody commented and said, "That's kind of ableist because what about people in wheelchairs?" She was like, "What about them? They're literally not walking." I just think TikTok has become, some people have become so chronically online and tunnel vision that they think every single thing that they see on the internet that is brought to their screen has to be about them. Not every single thing on the internet is completely and perfectly catered towards you.
Anyways, in the same vein, like, asking questions that could be answered in half a second with a simple Google search. If you don't provide them with the exact link for what they're searching for, they will get mad at you. Like truly, Gen Z almost expects to be served exactly whatever their souls desire right at that precise moment at all times. And this expectation to be spoon-fed and for every TikTok and every post and every conversation being tailored for their exact situation is something that truly needs to be studied, I swear. And yeah, this of course ties back to what we've just discussed, how Gen Z was raised with technology and overbearing parents, used to everything instant and easy. And when you grow up in an environment where information is always instantly available, it creates a strange kind of passivity, and it does resemble a kind of learned helplessness, if I'm being honest.
This is gonna sound really mean, but people have lost the ability to figure shit out. Like all my life, I've always believed everything is figure outable. Like I would go to work and I wouldn't want to ask too many questions, you know, because I don't really like talk to people. So I would just figure it out. And then if and only if I couldn't figure it out, then I would ask for help. I don't know, maybe it's a pride thing, but I would much rather just like figure something out than ask you for help and now I owe you one. I know that's not how things work, but like in my head, that's how it works. And in this day and age, when literally you can't even Google something without AI giving you the answer, how are you not able to figure shit out? I could say, here are the 5 things that I did to lose 5 pounds this summer and give step-by-step instructions on exactly what I did to lose 5 pounds. And there will be 100 people in the comments asking, wait, how did you do this? Can you teach me? You don't want to be taught. You just want someone to do it for you.
In that regard, to me at least, Gen Z is definitely a generation conditioned to believe that every answer should come directly to them, effortlessly, almost like a parent swooping in to solve a problem before the child even has to try. Okay, enough of me complaining. Let's move on to the second huge reason Gen Z clings to childhood, which is honestly a pretty straightforward one. The economy has made it nearly impossible to become an adult in the traditional sense.
I can't believe we had to be adults in the most unaffordable time in history. Like what luck is that? You know, every other generation got starter homes. We got starter packs for depression. Our parents were buying houses for the price of what we pay in rent now. Meanwhile, we're out here financing phones like they're real estate. Groceries, forget it. I walk into the store with $100 and leave with 2 bags of sadness and milk.
And I know this has become the core video essay talking point whenever we discuss anything around Gen Z, their issues, their quirks, everything ties back to the economy. But hey, it's true. It's true, we cannot ignore this huge factor that I really feel like plays the biggest role in Gen Z's behaviors and in millennials too, to be honest. Like millennials got hit with the Great Recession right as they were trying to start their careers, and Gen Z had COVID followed by a housing crisis that is somehow still getting worse every single year. Entry-level jobs are basically non-existent, underemployment is the norm, and housing is so unaffordable that moving out of your parents' house feels like a luxury.
The biggest recession indicator is that when I tell people I'm living with family, they go, "Oh my God, good for you. That is so smart. Good for you."
And yes, I don't know if I need to spell this out, but living at home or moving back home is not some quirky generational choice for Gen Zers. Like if they had affordable apartments, trust me, they would move out. Nobody dreams of being 25 and still treated like the kid in the family home. But when rent is $1 bajillion a month and the only jobs you can get are retail shifts or unpaid internships, what are you supposed to do? I cannot count the number of TikToks I've seen of, I don't know, engineers working liquor store shifts because there are no entry-level jobs in their field, no matter how prestigious their degree, or people in their 20s applying to dozens of jobs every week and getting ghosted by every single one of them.
If you have gotten a job in this job market, can you please tell me what you did in the comments? Because I'm going insane. I just went through 2 months, 6 rounds of interviews with a company, made it to the very end. I was so sure I was gonna get it, and I just got rejected.
I have no experience. I have no work ethic. I have a criminal record. Right there, stop right there, stop right there. You're hired, you're hired. You start tomorrow. Wait, what? What? I start tomorrow? What's my salary gonna be? You're gonna make enough to buy a home, 2 cars, and probably, sustainably support a family. But yeah, you start tomorrow. That's awesome. Great. Thank you so much for taking the time today. Just a little bit about myself. I recently graduated from my master's degree. I have 10 internships under my belt. I have 20 self-initiated projects that have led to $10 million each. Additionally, I also solved world hunger. Yeah, unfortunately, that's quite impressive, but we're just looking for somebody with more experience. More experience? What more do you want from me? This is a minimum wage position. This is a cashier position. How are you not gonna hire? You see, that's the problem with Gen Z nowadays. You guys expect bro, shut the—
Yeah, we do live in messed up times, and the kind of uncertainty young adults have to deal with doesn't just stunt your career, it stunts your development as a person. Because those years in your 20s are supposed to be formative. That's when you move out, make mistakes, crash and burn at your first job, learn how to manage money and hopefully get better at it, and figure out what kind of person you want to be in relationships. Those are messy years, but they're supposed to be messy, and they're supposed to happen while you are completely independent. But because of the state of the economy, for many Gen Zers, those same years are now happening in their childhood bedrooms with their parents still doing the grocery shopping, still paying the internet bill, and still treating them like they're in high school. So the normal timeline for becoming independent isn't just delayed by a couple of months, it's delayed by years, sometimes even an entire decade.
Every single thing I was told to do growing up, I was told to go to school, stay in school, get through high school, go to college, get a good degree, and then I go and get a job, and I'll be able to have a house, have a family, have kids, have income, not be broke, not be burnt out, not be fighting the actual will to continue to live. And that is why I feel like a child still. I am 30 years old and I feel that way. And I think a lot of us are retracting to nostalgic childhood-like things. Like I have this plushy pillow that's a coffee cup that has a smiley face on it. Because we have been through so much in our lives that started out as kids that we're burnt out. And we keep fighting to get jobs, to exist in the adult world, and it's not working. Everything that we were told would be attainable in our lives has not held up to be true. A lot of younger millennials and even Gen Z can't even afford to live on their own, and a lot of people are still living with their parents because they can't afford to live on their own, or would rather save up a little bit of money because they're not making enough money in the jobs that they're working 40 hours a week for to make enough money to live.
And yeah, people love to point at Gen Z and say, wow, they are so infantilized, they will literally never grow up. But what almost never gets acknowledged is that their growth is being actively stunted by an economic system that makes basic adulthood pretty inaccessible. Also, I know a lot of people basically shit on Gen Z for being unwilling to work hard or take corporate jobs seriously. There's the whole I don't dream of labor trend and quiet quitting, or in China also dumping, which literally means lying flat, a mindset of rejecting the pressure to overwork and overachieve. And I don't know about you, but I'm with Gen Zers on this one. I feel like not only these attitudes is a backlash against toxic productivity culture that we all live through as opposed to plain laziness, but also, guys, what's the point? Like, what is the point really? Because even if you work hard, go to college, hustle on the side, do all the right things, most of the time you still cannot afford rent, healthcare, or even a stable job. If you think about it, for a lot of Gen Zers, the traditional idea of success through labor doesn't really exist anymore. Adulthood only offers stress, instability, and disappointment, so naturally they retreat into childhood. And retreating into childhood is now easier than ever because we live in a consumeristic society that knows exactly how to package and sell that longing back to us. You don't have to imagine what it would feel like to reclaim your childhood. You can literally buy and relive it, you know. There's a jelly cat meant to stand in for affection, cute journals and pastel pens promising discipline and healing, a whole aisle of candles claim to fix your mood, cozy games for escapism, and a Disney trip for healing your inner child. And speaking of healing your inner child, well, hasn't this term been completely used and abused?
If you're seeing this, then this is your sign to start healing your inner child. I'm 27 and working on healing my inner child was the best thing I've ever done for my well-being and my mental health. And can you guess how I work on healing my inner child? I'll give you a clue. I'm nearly in my 30s and I collect dolls. And I just want to give you a quick show of my doll collection.
You know, healing your inner child started as a legitimate therapeutic concept, revisiting trauma, offering compassion to your younger self, and building adult coping mechanisms you maybe never had the chance to learn. But this phrase has been truly absorbed by influencers and brands and us regular people and reframed as a shopping excuse, and I'm gonna say it as a justification for sometimes ludicrous overconsumption. And honestly, it is fascinating because on one hand, healing your inner child makes complete sense. A lot of Gen Z never really had a safe childhood to begin with, or never really got to be kids. Some grew up in low-income households where toys were luxuries that they had to beg for on birthdays. Some were parentified or forced to grow up too quickly because of certain family instability. To be fair, I think these are the things that previous generations also faced to an extent, but also Gen Z's childhoods were shaped by lockdown drills, high divorce rates, and the overwhelming exposure of being online way too young. And I think there's truly something to be said about finally being able to afford the things that you dreamed about in your childhood. Like I, for instance, also grew up in low-income household. I didn't always have access to the toys and bits and pieces I wanted as a child, and sadly, by the time my family could finally afford them, I was already too old. I was expected to transition into my teenage self at that point and demonstrate more mature behaviors. So of course now, with at least some financial autonomy, there is a real sense of power in saying, you know what, no more asking my mom for a Bratz doll on my birthday. If I want 10 plushes in every single color, I'm going to buy them myself. Yeah, maybe buying a house is not in the cards for you, but you can still treat yourself to a Jellycat. Why not?
Come with me to treat myself to a brand new Jellycat and let's go Jellycat shopping. Guys, Jellycat have released a brand new collection, and when I saw that they had released a pistachio Jellycat, you guys know how much I love all things pistachio, I had to get it to add to my collection.
And you know, it's not just about the toy itself, like dressing up a Labubu or collecting Sony Angels is literally reenacting childhood play. You project emotions onto them, you dress them, you control them, and in a world that feels increasingly out of control, that kind of play is comforting, even grounding. And at this point, we all know you rarely see actual kids with Labubus and stuff. Mostly you see adults who are stressed, overwhelmed, and reaching for something soft and familiar. And all of that is fine and dandy, but like I said, I feel like healing your inner child term has been misused and distorted way too much. By the way, I have a whole video about the rise and weaponization of therapy speak if you'd like to check it out. But yeah, healing your inner child is supposed to be about emotional wounds and reparenting yourself. It's supposed to be messy, painful, and transformative. But what we are doing instead is simply buying comfort. And in a way, it works. Like, these things do make us feel safe, especially when the world outside feels so unstable. But at the end of the day, toys don't equal emotional growth, and buying a plushie isn't the same thing as learning how to regulate your emotions or work through a trauma. There is a difference between comfort and healing. Comfort is fine, escapism is totally fine, but there's something to be said about confusing them with actual inner work. Plus, again, using inner child label as an excuse to overconsume and reframe your bad spending habits, which the whole craze around Labubus is a perfect example of this. Now, that one I cannot pretend to understand.
What the fuck is a Labubu? What the fuck is a Labubu?
Are you ready to go?
Oh yeah, I just want to grab my bag. Right. Okay, good to go.
Oh, what is that?
Labubu? Do you not have one?
No, I
Literally
haven't,
everyone has a Labubu.
haven't seen those before. It's
Really? They're like the biggest thing right now. Hey.
Isn't that a little silly to carry around with you?
Are you mad because you didn't get one? Like, because they're all sold out? And like, why would it be silly? Everyone has it.
I know, but we're going to a work meeting. Don't you think
They
it's a little...
probably know what Labubus are if you're...
What is that?
My Labubu.
What?
Oh my god, if you haven't heard of them, just say that. I'm like, go on TikTok shop and get one.
And look, I don't think there's anything wrong with enjoying plushies or collecting Labubus. That's not the life I'm living, but I respect it if that's your genuine interest. Where I get frustrated though is when it devolves into this frenzy, right? Like adults screaming and fighting, acting like children with zero emotional regulation trying to get their hands on a specific limited edition Labubu or whatever. Yeah, you can tell I don't really know what it is that these people are chasing after.
I'm just gonna say it. These are really freaking ugly.
I think we've entered an era where people no longer shop based on need or even genuine desire. They shop for the rush.
I saw them and I was like, what are these ugly things? And I kept seeing them again and again and again. And over time, like, my perception changed.
It's 2 a.m. at Doncaster Shopping Centre in Melbourne's East, and Lawrence Yu is one of hundreds of people lining up for a chance to buy a Labubu.
It was almost like trying to buy a Birkin bag. That's what it felt like. I probably spent close to 1.6k Australian dollars on Labubus.
I think for some people collecting Labubus is an enjoyable hobby, but for other consumers they can become addictive.
Labubus are sold in what's known as a blind box, which means every purchase is a surprise. Dr. Christina Anthony says the hunt for a specific Labubu can become dangerous.
This is what we call a variable reward, and it's a very powerful form of reinforcement that can encourage some addictive behaviour because it leads to the release of the chemical dopamine in the brain. So while gamblers are chasing the next win, in a similar kind of vein, Labubu collectors are chasing the next rare collectible.
But anyway, this behavior doesn't really give me healing your inner child energy, more like this is just another wasteful trend similar to Stanley's, for example, and people are gonna move on as soon as something else, something new and more exciting comes along, and yeah, a whole lot of plastic is going to outlive us all in a landfill. Okay, I want to stop here for a second because I feel like there are two things that we need to talk about. Like the first thing is almost a counter argument against this entire video. Why do we even sneer at adults who enjoy plushies, cartoons, or video games? Like, why is it automatically coded as childish? I'm guilty of this too, and I think a lot of us are. It took me a while to realize that this judgment actually says more about me and us as a society than the people buying and enjoying plushies. It reveals an ingrained bias that children's media is somehow lesser, less serious, and less valuable. But if that's really the case, doesn't it just prove how little we respect children in the first place? As a society, we don't treat kids like full human beings, so of course anything designed for them gets dismissed as unserious. But think about it, what's really wrong with adults finding joy in things designed to spark wonder, play, and comfort? Like, adults also need joy and play, and in this economic and political climate, maybe even more so than children. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Critics who treat adult as a term of approval instead of as a merely descriptive term cannot be adult themselves. To be concerned about being grown up, to admire the grown up because it is grown up, to blush at the suspicion of being childish, these things are the marks of childhood and adolescence. And in childhood and adolescence, they are in moderation healthy symptoms. Young things ought to want to grow. But to carry on into middle life or even into early manhood, this concern about being adult is a mark of really arrested development. When I was 10, I read fairy tales in secret and would have been ashamed if I had been found doing so. Now that I'm 50, I read them openly. When I became a man, I put away childish things, including the fear of childishness and the desire to be very grown up." This is such a brilliant quote, and I think about it a lot because we've built this version of adulthood that is synonymous with seriousness, productivity, and bills. It's like the moment you turn 18, the only acceptable hobbies you can have are going to the gym, having a side hustle, and maybe drinking wine in the evenings. Yeah, no fun for you anymore, adult. So of course people run back to things that are child-coded. Like, if adulthood has been stripped of wonder, imagination, and fun, then where else do you expect people to find it? We accuse Gen Z of being childish for holding on to plushes or watching cartoons, but maybe the real problem is that we don't don't value happiness unless it is productive. Like joy is treated as frivolous, a luxury, something you're supposed to outgrow. But why should joy be exclusive to children? Cartoons, animated movies, plushes, even silly mobile games where you decorate your islands. I love those myself. They are not inherently childish. They're just play, and play is a human need, not a child-only one. The second thing I want to bring up is sort of a gendered angle of this topic, because I very often get comments like, only women do this, when I discuss any kind of topics around internet culture or general Gen Z millennial trends. So I just want to get ahead of that here. Yes, a lot of Gen Z is childish conversation does get framed around women. If you think about it, plushes, Sanrio, girl dinner, the whole shebang, right? But people rarely ask why women in particular might cling to childhood. Truth is, like I said, there is a gendered angle here we cannot ignore when you look at phrases like girl dinner or TikToks where people say, I'm just a girl, or in general, women openly calling themselves girls well into adulthood. What you're often seeing isn't cutesy infantilization, it's a rejection of womanhood itself. And it's a whole different serious topic to get into. I think there has been a couple of video essays made about it already, but really, that's genuinely so sad, not because women are leaning into it, but because society has made womanhood so unappealing and so unsafe for us. Like for men, entering adulthood is usually celebrated. Growing into manhood inevitably comes with praise. You're seen as stronger, wiser, more competent, and more respected. And I'm sure you have your own problems and challenges, but for women, they are on a whole another level, because for us, the shift into womanhood historically brings more sexualization, more judgment, more danger, and more expectation to carry invisible labor. Little girls are often forced to grow up too fast. They are either parentified at home or navigating unwanted attention way too young, or having to act mature before they even figured out who they really are. So when women later call themselves girls or embrace things that seem childish, maybe it's a way of reclaiming the years they never got to have. Sadly, girlhood is a much safer identity compared to womanhood, because womanhood in our culture is tied to aging, which is the worst crime a woman can commit, right? And also huge responsibility and loss of social currency. So I think society punishes women twice. First, by stealing their childhood way too early, and second, by mocking them when they try to reclaim it. Finally, we have to talk about nostalgia, because I feel like it's a big part of this whole clinging to childhood conversation. And if there's one thing Gen Z is known for, it's for being nostalgic. Sometimes comically so, because you'll see 19-year-olds reminiscing about 2017 like it was some lost golden era, making edits about simpler times when they were just 15. And for the longest time, this also seemed kind of ridiculous to me. I couldn't understand this fascination with not so recent past that Gen Z seem to have. But actually, again, it kind of makes perfect sense. Like we've already established, Gen Z is the first generation raised within the internet and not just around it. That means they grew up too fast, exposed to adult content, trauma, and global disasters far earlier than anyone should have been. And social media accelerated everything, trends, slang, even aging, and I'm sure you too have seen many 13-year-olds today that often look and act more like a 25-year-old than a middle schooler. I for one looked like a boiled potato when I was 13, but open TikTok and you'll find many teenage baddies. And even though Gen Z's childhood was far from perfect, it was still the last time many of them felt safe. So nostalgia isn't really about Club Penguin, Cartoon Network, or Webkins. It's about the emotional state attached to them, that fleeting sense of innocence before the world collapsed into pandemics, housing crisis, and climate dread. So when Gen Z gets nostalgic, what they're really missing isn't the content itself, it's the feeling of being unburdened. And to be honest, that probably goes for every single person on earth. But Again, there is yet another layer to this. Gen Z's past is heavily archived. They were really the first generation to document themselves in real time, posting YouTube videos and running Tumblr at 13. Plus, internet remembers everything, so every cringy username, every grainy Instagram filter, every embarrassing photo, it's all still there, accessible and replayable. So looking back is not just remembering, it's more so scrolling through version of ourselves preserved forever online. And that creates a weird effect. Instead of nostalgia being spontaneous, like a 40-year-old suddenly remembering the smell of their kitchen or something, Gen Z's nostalgia becomes a ritual. They can see their past selves on demand, which makes missing the past feel constant, almost chronic sort of pain. That is why people say that Gen Z is the youngest generation to already feel old, the ones that grieve the versions of themselves that existed 5 years ago, 3 years ago, even just last month. And when the present feels overwhelming and the future looks bleak, nostalgia becomes a survival mechanism, a way to retreat to a place that at least felt safe, even if it never truly was. So yeah, when you put it all together, the lost rites of passage, hovering parents, delayed independence, economic and political instabilities, divorce rates, you start to see why Gen Z is so nostalgic and why they cling to their labubus and to childhood in general so tightly. Not because they're lazy or unwilling to grow up or selfish, at least I don't think so. That cannot be true for the entire generation, you know. It's more so because in a world this unpredictable and this chaotic and unsafe, childhood is the last metaphor people have for stability, safety, and hope. Let me know your thoughts. Maybe there are some points or some reason that I missed. As always, I'm looking forward to reading your comments, and feel free to agree or disagree with me. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. A huge percentage of my regular viewers are not subscribed to my channel, which is quite offensive if you ask me, so do it. And you can also follow me on my other social medias if you'd like to keep up with me. And yeah, stay safe. I'll see you in my next one, guys.